Welcome, dear listener. Settle in. Loosen your shoulders. Let the weight of the day slip from them, like a heavy cloak laid down by the door. Tonight, we are going to wander, slowly and softly, through a place that has been quiet for a very long time. A small harbor on the southern shore of the Caspian Sea, in the long-ago days of ancient Persia. There is no hurry here. There is nothing you must remember, nothing you must do. Only follow the sound of my voice and let yourself drift. We arrive at the very edge of dawn, when the world is still made of half things. Half night, half morning. Half dream, half waking. The sky above the water is the color of old pearl, soft and gray and faintly pink at the seam where it meets the sea. The Caspian itself lies almost perfectly still, a vast sheet of polished pewter, breathing in long, slow swells that you can feel more than see. A breath in, a breath out, the same patient rhythm it has kept for 10,000 years. The harbor town curls along the shore like a sleeping cat. Its low houses are built of pale mud brick and weathered timber, their flat roofs softened by years of salt wind and gentle rain. Smoke rises from one or two chimneys in slender, pale ribbons, where someone is already coaxing a morning fire to life. The smell of that fire reaches us across the water. Wood smoke and warm bread and something faintly sweet, perhaps a handful of dried apricots set to soften in a clay pot. It is the smell of a home that has been a home for many hundreds of years. The first light of the sun has not yet shown itself, but it is near. You can sense it the way you sense a kind hand approaching in the dark. The eastern hills behind the town hold a long, soft glow, a promise of gold tucked just below their ridgeline. Above them, one last star is still awake, pale as a candle in a window left burning all night for a traveler's return. We drift in closer, on water so smooth it seems almost a courtesy to disturb it. Wooden ships rest at anchor in the bay, their hulls dark and round-shouldered, their tall masts standing perfectly still against the pearl-gray sky. Furled sails are bound up neatly along their yards, like sleeping birds tucked beneath their own wings. From these ships have come bolts of silk, soft as breath, carried over mountains and deserts from the workshops of distant cities. From these ships have come sealed jars of saffron, of cardamom, of rosewater so fragrant a single drop can perfume an entire room. They sleep now, these ships, gathered together as quietly as horses in a stable at dusk. Around their masts, the gulls have begun their slow morning circles. They do not cry, not yet, only glide, white wings spread wide, drawing long, patient arcs across the soft sky. Now and then one settles on a railing, fluffs itself, and tucks its head back down, unwilling to fully wake. We understand. We are in no hurry to wake either. A wooden jetty reaches out from the shore, its planks darkened by the night's damp. At the end of it, a single lantern still burns, forgotten by the harbourmaster who set it there before sleeping. Its small flame trembles inside its glass, brave and tired and lovely, the very last lantern of the night. As we drift past, its warm yellow light spills a little path across the water, and for a moment the sea wears a thin gold thread across its gray silk. Beyond the jetty, the cobbled lanes of the town climb gently uphill, threading between the low houses, between fig trees and old stone walls. Somewhere up there, a single rooster has just thought about crowing and decided to wait a little longer. A donkey shifts its weight in a stable. A baker turns over in her warm bed and smiles, knowing the dough she set last night has risen well. The town is gathering itself, slowly, the way a cat stretches each paw in turn before deciding to stand. And here, just here, the first gold finally lifts above the eastern hills. It moves across the rooftops without sound. It touches the masts of the sleeping ships. It touches the white wings of the gulls. It touches your face, dear listener, and it is warm. We have all the time in the world. The harbor is waking, and we are going to wander through it together, you and I, very slowly, with nothing at all to do but listen and look and breathe. So we step away from the water's edge, you and I, and we follow the soft pull of the morning into the heart of the harbor, where the market is just beginning to stir. The path beneath our feet is old, worn smooth by centuries of slippered feet and the wheels of wooden carts, and it curves gently inland through a low arch of pale, sun-warmed stone. The first sound that greets us is the small, sleepy music of shutters being opened. One by one, all along the lane, wooden shutters swing outward on their tired hinges, with little creaks that sound almost like sighs. A baker, somewhere ahead of us, props his door open with a smooth round stone he has used for that very purpose every morning for 30 years. And out from his doorway drifts the warm, soft scent of flatbread, that gentle, golden smell of dough touched by fire, with just a whisper of honey and sesame. We pause for a moment, simply to breathe it in. There is no hurry. The bread is being lifted from the clay oven in slow, careful movements, each round loaf placed on a woven mat to cool. Steam rises in lazy spirals, curling upward into the cool morning air and dissolving somewhere near the painted beams of the awning above. We walk on, and the lane opens before us into a small square. Here, the traders are setting out their wares with the unhurried ease of people who have done this 1,000 times. There is no rush in their hands. They move like the tide moves, patient, gentle, certain. To our left, an old man in a soft gray robe is unrolling a cloth the color of cream. Onto it, with the care of someone arranging stars, he places small heaps of saffron, those tiny, deep red threads that look like crimson thread, like the last warm light of evening gathered into little hills. The scent rises faintly, earthy and sweet, like a meadow at dusk. Beside him, a woman with kind eyes and silver bangles at her wrists is laying out dried apricots. They glow like little lanterns, soft amber and honey gold, piled in shallow wooden bowls. She arranges them slowly, one bowl at a time, and now and then she lifts one to her nose and breathes its sun-warmed sweetness, and smiles to herself as if remembering something pleasant. Across the way, a young trader with a sleepy yawn is splitting open the first pomegranate of the day. The fruit opens with a soft, almost musical crack, and inside, the seeds glitter like tiny rubies catching the morning sun. He arranges the pomegranates in a careful pyramid, each one polished against the sleeve of his tunic until it shines. Above us, striped awnings stretch from stall to stall, bands of soft red and faded blue, of cream and dusty gold, and they ripple, ever so slightly, as the breeze from the Caspian wanders through them. The light beneath these awnings is gentle and tinted, like sunlight passing through old stained glass, falling in warm pools onto the cobblestones. And now, from somewhere between the stalls, comes the soft patter of small feet. Two children, a little girl in a blue tunic, a little boy with a paper kite tucked under one arm, come padding through the square, their laughter quiet and breathy, the way children laugh when the morning is still new and the day still feels like a secret. They are following a cat. The cat, of course, is very dignified about being followed. It is a soft tabby, the color of cinnamon and toasted almonds, and it pads along with its tail held high, weaving between baskets of figs and bundles of dried mint. The cat pauses to consider a fish stall, decides against it, and slips beneath a hanging rope of garlic. The children pause too, peering after it, giggling behind their hands. And then they wander off, slow as dreaming, toward the smell of the warm bread. A coppersmith, somewhere down the lane, taps his hammer once, twice, 3 times, soft, ringing notes like the chime of a faraway bell. A donkey, tied gently to a post, sighs and shifts its weight. A sparrow lands on the edge of a fountain at the center of the square and dips its small beak into the water, sending out tiny, perfect ripples. Everything moves slowly. Everything is unhurried. The whole market breathes together, in and out, like a great soft creature waking from a long and comfortable sleep. And we stand within it, you and I, simply listening to the shutters, to the bread, to the children, to the cat, to the gentle hum of a harbor that has been waking this same way every morning for 1,000 peaceful years. And now, as the harbor settles into its gentle morning rhythm, let us turn our steps inland, just a little way, just a few soft footfalls beyond the market's edge, to where the road from the desert finally meets the road from the sea. Here, rising from the dust like a long, low fortress of honey-colored stone, stands the Caravanserai. Its walls are thick and patient. Its great wooden gates, studded with iron the size of a child's fist, have been swung open since before dawn, waiting, as they have waited for centuries, for travelers to come in from the long, lonely miles of ancient Persia. And listen, can you hear it? That distant, shuffling music, soft as falling sand. The slow, weary tread of camels coming home. They appear first as shapes in the haze, a ripple of shadow along the horizon, and then, little by little, they become real. Tall, dusty, swaying creatures, their long necks rocking gently with each step, their great padded feet making almost no sound at all upon the warm earth. Bells hang at their throats, small brass bells, worn smooth by 1,000 journeys, and they chime only now and then, a lazy, half-asleep sound, as though the bells themselves are tired and wish only to rest. Behind the camels walk the men, wrapped in long robes the color of the desert itself, their faces half hidden beneath folds of soft cotton. They have come from far away, these travelers, from the cities of the eastern plains, from the high passes of the mountains, from oases where date palms lean over still, blue pools. They have walked for weeks. They have slept under skies so crowded with stars that the night seemed almost crowded. And now, at last, they are here, at the water's edge, at the end of the long road. The great gates draw them in, and the courtyard of the Caravanserai opens before them like the palm of a generous hand. It is a wide, quiet space, paved with worn stones, shaded at its edges by arched colonnades, where the air stays cool even in the hottest hour of the day. A fountain murmurs at its center, a low, round fountain, its water so clear that you can see the small blue tiles along its bottom, and around the fountain the camels are led, one by one, and one by one. With soft groans of contentment, they kneel. Oh, how slowly a camel kneels. First the front legs fold, gentle as the closing book. Then the great body sinks back. Then the hind legs tuck beneath, and at last the long neck lowers, and the tired head comes to rest upon the cool stones, and the eyes, those dark and knowing eyes with their long, feathery lashes, drift slowly closed. A caravan of camels asleep in a courtyard is one of the quietest sights in all the world. The travelers work without hurry. They unbuckle the great woven bags from the camels' flanks. They lift down bundles tied in undyed linen, bundles that have ridden 1,000 miles without ever being opened. Inside are treasures, bolts of silk so fine you could pull a whole length of it through a wedding ring, carpets rolled tight and fragrant with the smoke of distant cooking fires, small wooden boxes of spices that perfume the air the moment their lids are lifted, cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, saffron the color of a sunset. The men stack the bundles carefully beneath the shaded arcade. They speak to one another in low voices, in the gentle, unhurried way of people who have shared a long journey. A boy brings them bowls of cool water, and they drink deeply, their eyes half closed, the water running down their dusty beards, and they smile, simply because the water is cold and they are safe, and the road is behind them. In one corner of the courtyard, an old cook tends a low fire. A copper pot hangs above it, and something savory is bubbling there. A stew of lentils and onions and fragrant herbs, and the smell drifts across the courtyard like a soft, welcoming hand. Somewhere, unseen, a man is playing a 3-stringed instrument, plucking it so gently that the notes seem to wander rather than arrive, each one finding its own slow path through the warm afternoon air. And above it all, the sky is that pale, hazy blue of a long summer day, and the walls of the Caravanserai lean inward, just slightly, like a mother bending over a cradle. The desert has given up its travelers. The sea waits just beyond. And here, in this quiet in-between place, everything, for a little while, is gloriously, blessedly still. And now we drift forward, gently, unhurriedly, toward the water. The road beneath our feet softens, its dust giving way to smooth stones, worn pale by centuries of sandaled feet and rolling cartwheels. The air changes too. The dry warmth of the caravan square begins to mingle with something cooler, something touched by salt and reed and distant rain. A breath of the Caspian, drifting inland to meet us, and as we follow it, the sound of the town quiets behind us, folding itself away like a curtain drawn by a patient hand. Ahead, the harbor opens. It does not announce itself. There are no great gates, no trumpets, no crash of waves. The Caspian, in this sheltered cove of ancient Persia, is a modest sea, a silver sea, a sea that seems, at this hour, to be half asleep. It lies before us like a vast pewter dish, its surface barely troubled, catching the midday sun and softening it, scattering it into 1,000 slow, blinking lights that rise and fall with the gentlest of breathing motions. We step onto the pier. The stones here are old. Older than the merchants, older than the caravans, older perhaps than the town itself. They are laid in long, uneven rows, each block kissed smooth by generations of rope and wave, their corners rounded like worn river pebbles. Moss grows in the seams. Small, pale crabs tuck themselves into the shadows. And the pier stretches out, calm and long, like a stone path laid across the edge of the world. The ships are waiting. 3 of them rest along the pier, their broad wooden hulls leaning just slightly against the bumpers of woven straw. They are round-bellied ships, built for trade, not for speed. Their timbers are dark with pitch and age, patched here and there with lighter planks where some old storm once asked a small question of the carpenter. Their masts are lowered halfway, resting in their cradles. Their sails the color of bread crust and honey, lie folded on the deck like sleeping animals. Sailors move across them. Slowly, peacefully. There is no hurry here. One man, barefoot and sunbrowned, sits cross-legged on the middle ship, mending a tier in a great canvas sail spread across his lap. His needle is bone. His thread is waxed linen, dyed the color of pomegranate. He pulls it through, pauses, smooths the cloth with the flat of his hand, and pulls again. His breath keeps time with the stitches. In and out. In and out. A quiet rhythm that belongs more to lullabies than to labor. Further along, 2 boys, nephews perhaps of the captain, are coiling ropes. Thick ropes, rough and golden, still smelling faintly of the hemp fields from which they came. The boys work in silence, looping the rope in great soft spirals, layer upon layer, until each coil sits on the deck like a sleeping snail. When they finish one, they lean against the mast, share a fig from a shared cloth, and begin another. Gulls drift above, but even the gulls are lazy today. They wheel without crying. They settle on the masts and fold their wings and look out across the water as though they too have decided that midday is for watching. Below the pier, the water laps. A soft, soft sound. Not waves. Not really. Just the Caspian, breathing against the stones. A hush-hush-hushing that goes on and on, like the murmur of someone speaking quietly in the next room, telling a long and tender story you are not quite meant to hear. A fisherman walks past us, carrying a wooden bucket. Inside, 3 silver fish lie side by side, their scales still bright. He nods as he passes. His face is creased from decades of looking into the sun. His smile is small and warm. He does not speak. He does not need to. He walks on, his sandals tapping softly on the stones, and disappears into the shadow of a warehouse whose door stands open to the breeze. Somewhere, we cannot quite tell where, a woman is humming. An old song, a song with no clear beginning and no clear end. Her voice drifts out from one of the little houses along the harbor wall, threads through the rigging of the ships, and settles over the water like a veil. And the sun, gentle today, hangs high and golden, pouring its warmth across the pier, across the sails, across the silver sea, across our shoulders, warming us, steadying us, softening every thought we might have brought with us, until all that remains is this: The slow ships, the patient sailors, the humming woman, the quiet, quiet sea. And from that quiet, quiet sea, let us step now onto the worn stones of the harbor road, following the gentle pull of lamplight toward a doorway set deep into a wall of warm, honey-colored brick. The door is open, as doors along this shore so often are, and the scent drifting out of it is something you will remember long after this night has passed. Cinnamon. Cardamom. The dry sweetness of saffron. The green, grassy breath of mint leaves crushed between patient fingers. Breathe it in, slowly, and let your shoulders soften. You are welcome here. This is the warehouse of a merchant whose name has been lost to time, though the grooves his sandals wore into the threshold have not. Step over them gently. Inside, the ceiling is low and beamed with dark cedar, and lanterns hang from iron hooks, swaying just barely, as if the whole room were breathing in its sleep. The floor is swept clean. The walls are stacked with wonders. Along one side, bolts of silk rest upon long wooden shelves, rolled loosely so the fabric may breathe. There are silks the color of plum skins at dusk. Silks the green of a shallow river where the sunlight reaches the stones. Silks so pale they seem almost to be made of morning mist, and silks so deeply red they remember the heart of a pomegranate split open in summer. One bolt has been unrolled across a low table, and a single lantern leans close to it, making the threads shine like still water. Against the other wall stand the sacks. Coarse linen, tied at the throats with rough cord, each one labeled in careful, quiet ink. Cinnamon from lands where the bark peels in long curls from warm, wet trees. Cardamom pods the color of old parchment, waiting to be cracked between a thumb and finger. Peppercorns, black and fragrant. Cloves, like tiny carved nails. A wooden bowl holds dried rose petals, and another holds the long orange threads of saffron, so delicate they seem afraid of the very lamplight. In the middle of this quiet abundance, 3 men sit upon a low carpet, and a 4th is pouring tea. One is from ancient Persia, and his robe is the soft gray of a dove's wing, bordered in a thread of pale gold. Another has come from far to the east, from the great silk lands of China, and his sleeves are wide, and his smile is unhurried. The third has sailed from the distant Mediterranean, and the sun of many shores has warmed the lines around his eyes. They are not rushing. They are not loud. They are simply sharing the evening. The tea is poured in a slow, thin ribbon into small glass cups, and the glass catches the lantern light and holds it like something precious. A little honey is stirred in. A single dried rosebud floats to the surface of one cup and turns, gently, in its own small current. The men lift the cups in both hands, as is kind, and they breathe the steam before they drink. Listen, now, to how they speak. Their words are low, the kind of words a river makes when it is passing over smooth stones. They speak of prices, yes, but softly. They speak of the long roads behind them, the mountain passes, the desert crossings, the nights beneath stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. They speak of wives waiting, of children grown a hand's breadth taller since the last return, of gardens left in the care of younger brothers. They speak of a camel who is particularly stubborn, and they all laugh quietly, because every caravan has had such a camel. A small brass tray is passed between them, holding dates stuffed with almonds, and figs dried sweet in the late summer sun. A merchant's apprentice, no more than a boy, sits cross-legged in the corner, tallying on a slate with a calm, careful hand. His eyelids are growing heavy. The numbers blur kindly at their edges. He does not bite it. He lets himself drift, as you may let yourself drift, here, beside him. The silk on the table ripples softly when someone leans a sleeve across it. A single moth wanders in through the open door, circles the lantern once, and settles on a ceiling beam to rest. Outside, the harbor murmurs on. Inside, the tea is refilled. And so, the evening settles into itself. The traders of far lands, their spices and their silks, their slow and friendly voices, their cups of honeyed tea, and the warm golden hush of a warehouse where, for this long, quiet hour, the whole world has agreed to lay down its burdens and simply be still together. And when, at last, we slip back out through the warehouse doors, the light of the afternoon has softened to a low, honeyed gold, and the harbor, which had been all bustle and shout only hours before, now seems to breathe more slowly, as if it too had taken its cup of tea and settled in for a while. We do not go back down to the quayside. Instead, we turn behind the great stone storehouses and follow a narrow lane that winds inland, a lane so narrow that two donkeys could not pass each other without a small, patient negotiation, and so old that its paving stones have been worn to the gentleness of river pebbles by 1,000 years of quiet feet. This is the Craftsman's Lane. It is not a grand place. You will not find it on any map. There is no signboard, no archway, no flourish of carved stone to announce it. There's only the soft, familiar music of making, and if you close your eyes and listen, you will hear at once where you have come. From a low doorway on your left comes the steady, rhythmic tap of a small hammer on copper. Tap, 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 tap. It is not a hurried sound. It is the sound of a man who has been doing this work since he was a boy, and whose father did this work, and whose father's father did this work, and who now sits cross-legged on a worn cushion, shaping a wide tray, as if he were coaxing it into being rather than forging it. Beside him, finished pieces catch the slanting light, a bowl, a ewer, a lamp still warm from the fire, and each one glows like a small, captured sunrise. He looks up as we pass, and gives us a nod so slight it is almost a blessing, and then returns to his tapping. A few doors further on, the lane opens into a small courtyard, and here the weavers have set up their looms. The looms are tall, taller than the weavers themselves, and the threads stretch upward in long, patient rows, like the strings of some silent instrument. A grandmother sits at one loom, and a young woman at another, and between them a child is winding a spindle, her small fingers already sure of their task. The cloth that grows beneath their hands is the color of pomegranate seeds, and the color of desert dusk, and the color of the sky just before the stars come out. Every now and then the shuttle slides across with a soft whispering sound, shh, and a new thread joins the pattern, and the grandmother hums a tune so old that even she has forgotten its words, and the young woman hums along without quite meaning to. It is the kind of sound you could fall asleep to, and many children of this town have, curled up beneath the loom on a folded blanket, listening to the shuttle go shh, shh, until the afternoon gathered them softly up and carried them off to dream. Further still, the lane turns a gentle corner, and here we come to the potters. Their workshop is open to the lane, its doors thrown wide to catch the light, and inside, 2 potters sit at their wheels. One is shaping a tall water jar, drawing the clay upward between his palms with a slow, almost tender patience, as if the jar itself were deciding how it wished to be. The other is finishing a row of small bowls, each one no bigger than a cupped hand, meant for the tea houses and the kitchens of the town. The floor around them is dusted with the pale, soft powder of dried clay, and the shelves behind them hold row upon row of finished work, waiting to be fired. Plates and pitchers and oil lamps and honey pots, all the small, needful things that a town uses and uses and uses, and never quite thinks about, and could not live a single day without. A cat, gray as wood smoke, is asleep on a sack of straw in the corner, her paws tucked neatly beneath her. And as we stand in the doorway, watching, it comes to us, gently, without fanfare, that this is what kept such a town alive. Not the great ships, not the fine silks, not the gold coins that changed hands down at the harbor, but these, the tap of the hammer, the whisper of the shuttle, the slow turning of the wheel, the gray cat sleeping in the warm afternoon, and the patient, steady, almost prayerful work of hands that knew exactly what they were doing and were in no hurry at all to be finished. From the narrow lane where the weavers worked, the road curved gently upward, following the slope of the hill in the easy, unhurried way that old roads do. The cobbles here were worn smooth by centuries of slippered feet, and between them grew small tufts of thyme and tiny blue flowers whose names only the grandmothers remembered. A breeze drifted down from the higher terraces, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and of something warmer and sweeter and older, the scent of tea brewing over a low coal fire. You would smell it before you saw it. That was always the way with this tea house. The fragrance arrived first, like a soft-spoken host stepping out to greet you at the gate, and only then did the building itself appear. Low and whitewashed, its wooden beams silvered with age, its roof of red clay tiles leaning ever so slightly toward the sea, as if it too liked to look down at the harbor in the long golden hours of the afternoon. Above the entrance, a grapevine had been trained along a trellis of weathered cedar, and over the years it had grown so thick and so generous that it formed a ceiling of its own, a soft green canopy, dappled with sunlight, heavy now in the late season with small clusters of dark grapes that hung like drowsy bells. The shade beneath it was cool and dim and sweet, and the light that fell through the leaves was not quite light at all, but something gentler, a slow, dancing, underwater kind of brightness that seemed to move whenever the breeze moved, and to rest whenever the breeze rested. Beneath this pergola, on low wooden stools and cushions faded to the color of old roses, the old men had gathered. They gathered here every afternoon, as they had done for more years than any of them could quite recall. Some wore long robes of soft gray wool. Some wore embroidered caps, their stitching loosened by time. Their hands were mapped with the fine lines of long lives, and their beards, white as river foam or silver as a winter moon, moved gently when they spoke, and more gently still when they did not. 2 of them were bent over a chessboard of inlaid walnut and bone. The pieces were small and finely carved, worn to a soft gleam by the touch of countless fingers across countless afternoons. A pawn was lifted. A pawn was set down. A long pause followed, the kind of pause that is not waiting, exactly, but is something closer to listening. For chess here was not hurried. A single game might unfold across an entire afternoon, broken only by the refilling of tea, the pass of a small plate of dates, and the occasional quiet laugh at a move that was clever or bold or beautifully fondly foolish. On the low tables between them stood the glasses, small, narrow, waisted glasses of clear tulip shape, the kind that have been made in this part of the world for so long that no one thinks to call them anything but simply asterisk the glass. They were filled with pomegranate tea, its color the deep ruby of late sunset, and they sat cooling, patient as the drinkers, letting the steam rise in slow, curling threads into the green shade above. A cube of honeyed sugar rested on each saucer, waiting to be placed between the teeth in the old manner, so that the sweetness might arrive with each sip, and not before. And all the while, in the corner there sat a musician. He was an older man with kind eyes, and across his lap he held a sitar, a long-necked lute, its wooden belly polished by decades of resting against his chest. He was not performing. He was simply playing, the way a cat purrs, or a kettle hums, or a river talks to its stones. His fingers moved over the strings with a softness that seemed almost accidental, plucking out a slow melody that wandered and returned, like a traveler who has all the time in the world, and no particular place he needs to be. The notes drifted out from under the grapevine. They passed over the chessboard, where they were received without comment, because the old men had heard this song, or songs very like it, for most of their lives. They slipped between the cooling glasses. They floated down the curve of the lane, toward the harbor, toward the sea. And if you closed your eyes here, just for a moment, beneath the green and golden ceiling of leaves, you might hear, very faintly, very far away, the distant murmur of the waves answering back. The murmur of the waves led us on, though our feet moved slowly, as feet do in such places, where the afternoon has settled deep into the stones and no one is in any hurry at all. We followed the lane downward, past the last of the tea houses, past a courtyard where a gray cat slept upon a bolt of unbleached linen, past the little workshop where a coppersmith tapped, a rhythm so unhurried it seemed less like work than like a heartbeat. And then, quite suddenly, the lane opened, and there it stood, the customs house of the harbor, low and long and built of pale honey-colored brick, with a tiled roof, the soft green of old bronze, and a doorway wide enough for two laden camels to pass through, shoulder to shoulder, without ever brushing the frame. Step inside with me now. Step in out of the brightness, into the cool, considered shadow of the Harbourmaster's hall. Here the air is different. Here the air has been kept, as one keeps good wine, in a place that does not change. It smells of old cedar, and of beeswax, and of the particular papery sweetness of ledgers that have been opened and closed, 1,000,000 times. A high window lets in one slow shaft of afternoon light, and in that shaft the dust drifts, turning, like the smallest, quietest snow. The Harbourmaster sits behind a long table of dark walnut, polished by centuries of sleeves. He is a small, neat man with a beard the color of river silt, and spectacles so fine they seem made of 2 drops of water. He does not hurry. He has never hurried. Hurry, he would tell you, is for those who do not trust the sea, and the sea is always patient, and so is he. Before him lies the great ledger, its pages the color of cream, its margins ruled in the faintest red. Beside the ledger sits a little pot of sealing wax, the deep, deep red of pomegranate, warmed gently over a single candle that has burned since morning and will burn until dusk. A merchant stands at the table. He is tired from the long road, but here, in this cool room, his tiredness has softened into something almost pleasant, a slow settling of the shoulders, a long breath let out at last. Upon the scales, the tall brass scales with their slender chains and their two shallow dishes, the Harbourmaster places, one by one, small bundles wrapped in undyed cloth. Saffron, perhaps. Or indigo. Or the dried rind of bitter oranges, bound for a kitchen 3 months. Journey away. The scales dip. The scales rise. They find their quiet balance, and then they rest. In the corner, an old clerk works an abacus. You know the sound. You have known it, perhaps, without ever hearing it before. The beads are of worn red sandalwood, and when he slides them, click, 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 it is the softest, most orderly sound in the world. It is the sound of a thought taking shape slowly. It is the sound of the day being counted, bead by bead, into the evening. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is ever rushed. A number is not a race. A number is a small, round thing to be placed gently into its place. The Harbourmaster dips his reed pen. The scratch of it upon the page is like a mouse walking upon dry leaves, far away, in a forest where no one is awake. He writes the weight. He writes the name. He writes the date. A date so old that you and I can scarcely imagine it, and yet here, in this room, it is simply today, and today is a good day, because the scales are true and the light is kind. Now he lifts the little brass seal, the one carved with a ship and a star, and he presses it, slowly, firmly, into the soft red wax. There is a small, satisfying sound, a tiny sigh of warm wax giving way. And the thing is done. The merchant bows. The Harbourmaster bows. And the ledger closes, not with a slam, never with a slam, but with the gentle, final hush of a book that knows it will be opened again tomorrow. Outside, the harbor waits. The sea is still murmuring, still answering. But here, inside, for this one long moment, the world has been weighed and named and sealed, and everything, every last thing, has been found to be exactly, perfectly in order. And so, quietly, as the candle flickers and the dust drifts in the high, slow light, we may rest here, too, a little longer, in the cool and careful keeping of the Harbourmaster's scales. And slowly, so slowly you scarcely notice the turning, the light inside the Harbourmaster's room begins to change. The dust that drifted through the high window is catching a different color now, a softer gold, a deeper amber, and the shadows at the foot of the great ledger have grown long and kind. Evening is coming. Evening has, in truth, been coming for some time, quietly, the way evening always comes to a harbor, on the soft gray paws of the gulls and the lengthening of the masts, shadows across the boards. Step outside, friend. Step softly. The door of the Harbourmaster's house opens onto the long stone walk above the quay, and the first thing you will feel is the cool, clean breath of the Caspian, carrying a trace of salt and reeds and the far-off smoke of kitchens. The sea has turned the color of a pewter plate polished by years of gentle hands. The sky above it is a great, slow bowl of honey, with a single evening star trembling up, shy as a lamp newly lit. And there, along the harbor wall, the lamps are being lit. One by one, a boy walks the low stone rim, a long taper in his hand, and he touches the taper to each oil lamp in its iron cradle, and one by one, in answer, the little flames wake. They are small at first, no bigger than a thumbnail, uncertain, flickering, and then they steady, and they settle, and they begin to breathe. A warm, buttery glow spreads from each lamp across the damp stone, catching on the coils of rope and the scales of drying fish and the weathered wood of the boats, softening every hard edge into something kind. The harbor, which all day was a place of work and shouting and wait and count, is becoming, as the lamps bloom, a place of quiet company. A place where one might speak more softly and be heard more fully. Turn now and follow the slow drift of people toward the square. They are coming from every lane. The dye maker, her hands still faintly blue. The rope mender, with shavings in his beard. Two grandmothers walking arm in arm, their slippers whispering on the cobbles. A little girl half asleep already on her father's shoulder, one small hand wound into his collar. A sailor with the roll of the deck still in his gait. They do not hurry. No one hurries toward a story. They drift, the way flour drifts toward the low place in a bowl, gathering without needing to be called. And at the center of the square, on the low stone bench beside the old plane tree, sits the storyteller. He is an old man. His beard is the color of wood ash. His cloak is the deep brown of river clay, worn soft at the elbows. On his knees rests a cup of tea whose steam rises in a slow, curling ribbon, catching the lamplight as it climbs. His eyes are half closed, not from tiredness, but from the particular, patient pleasure of a man who knows he will soon begin. The crowd settles around him in rings. The small children at his feet, cross-legged on the warm stones. Behind them the mothers and fathers, sitting on their heels or on folded cloaks. Behind them the older folk, on the benches that run along the square's edge, leaning on their sticks. And behind them all, standing easy in the doorways, the sailors and the traders, arms folded, faces tilted toward the tree. No one shushes anyone. The hush comes on its own. The storyteller lifts his cup, and he drinks, unhurried, the last warm sip. He sets the cup down beside him, with a little click against the stone. And then, in a voice like a slow river over smooth pebbles, he begins. He speaks of sailors, of a young man with calloused hands who sailed east one spring, following a rumor of blue glass, and came home at harvest time with a box of beads the color of summer dusk. He speaks of a saint whose small white shrine stands on the headland, who is said, in storms, to walk the beach and lay her hand on frightened prows. He speaks of a cat who once traveled, for reasons no one ever learned, from this harbor all the way to Samarkand inside a barrel of lentils, and of the merchant who found her there, and who laughed so hard he forgot to be angry. And the town listens with the quiet, attentive hush of an old, old friend settling in beside another at the close of a long and gentle day. And now, very slowly, as though someone has lowered a soft woolen blanket over the rooftops, the light begins to leave the harbor. It does not rush. It never does here. It simply thins the way honey thins at the edge of a warm spoon, spreading out across the tiled roofs and the plaster walls and the round, smooth stones of the quay until everything is the color of old gold, and then the color of rose, and then the color of a pigeon's wing, and then, at last, the tender, dusky blue that belongs only to the Caspian at the closing of a long day. The boats in the harbor settle lower in the water, as boats do when the wind forgets them. Their rigging creaks once, twice, a slow, companionable sound like the sigh of a grandfather easing himself into his favorite chair, and then the ropes fall quiet. The little pennants that fluttered all afternoon hang soft and folded now, content to rest. A gull drifts past on the last warm breath of the day, and even the gull does not call. It only tilts a wing and glides and is gone. Along the narrow lanes of the town, shutters are drawn to with a gentle wooden click. A lamp is lit behind a saffron-colored curtain, and the curtain glows, and the glow spills a little way onto the cobbles, and a cat steps into it, stretches, and steps out again. A woman calls softly to a child from an upstairs window, and the child comes running, laughing, bare feet tapping the warm stones, and the door closes, and the laughter becomes muffled, and the muffled laughter becomes a lullaby, and the lullaby becomes the hush of a house at rest. On the doorstep of the baker's shop, the old dog we heard earlier lays his gray muzzle down upon his paws. He sighs, one deep contented sigh, and closes his eyes. The baker, inside, wipes flour from his hands with a cloth as soft as sleep, and banks the fire for the morning. Somewhere nearby, a kettle is lifted from its hook. Somewhere else, a grandmother folds a shawl. Somewhere else still, a small boy who wished he could stay awake a little longer discovers, to his own quiet surprise, that he cannot. Out on the headland, the little white shrine catches the very last of the light. For a moment, it shines like a lantern against the darkening sea, and then it too softens and folds itself into the blue of the evening. And the stars begin. They come one at a time at first, shy, careful stars, the kind that seem to peek out to see if they are welcome. They are. They always are. So more come and more, until the whole bowl of the sky above the harbor is quietly, patiently full of them. They lay a thin silver path across the water, from the beach all the way to the far horizon, as though inviting the tired old town to walk out across the sea in its sleep, if it should wish to. The waves lap the stones of the quay. Just that. Lap and lap and lap. A sound as old as the harbor itself. A sound the Silk Road knew, and the merchants knew, and the caravans knew, and the children of this place have always known. It is the sound the Caspian makes when it is tucking its shore in for the night. And the town listens, and lets itself be tucked in. The spice jars in the Caravanserai sleep among their own quiet perfumes. The camels, somewhere out beyond the walls, breathe slow, warm, dusty breaths into the dark. The ledger in the counting house lies closed, its numbers at peace. The saint on the headland keeps her gentle watch. The cat, wherever she is, whether here in the harbor or still somehow in Samarkand, dreams of warm barrels and kind laughter. And high above it all, the stars keep their old, unhurried vigil, as they have kept it for 1,000 years, and will keep it for 1,000 more. So let us leave this place now, just as it is. The boats rocking softly, the lanes emptying of footsteps, the lamps behind the curtains growing dim, one by one, the old dog sighing, the waves murmuring, the sky full of quiet light. Rest here a while if you wish. The harbor does not mind. It has been resting a very, very long time. And the sea and the stars and the small white shrine and the dreaming town, all of them together are glad to have had your company. Good night.